The deep ocean was silent. Abyss 9, a human-built city at the bottom of the sea, had stood for nearly 8 months without problems. It was cold, quiet, and safe. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. Abyss 9 was designed to be strong. Its walls were built to handle the pressure of the deep sea. Inside the dome, people lived, worked, and studied the ocean around them. The city was a symbol of human strength and science. Over 100 people lived there, scientists, engineers, military officers, and workers. Dr. Sarah Lane, the city's lead engineer, walked through the main control room. Large monitors showed the status of the city. Green lights everywhere. Systems normal. Oxygen level stable. Pressure inside the dome perfect. But Sarah had a bad feeling in her stomach. Something didn't feel right. She looked at the security feeds again. Most showed only dark water and slow-moving fish. But camera 12, the one outside Sector 3, kept flickering. She tapped on the screen and frowned. It was the same camera that showed movement last night. Small movements, quick shadows. She had reported it, but nothing was found. A message popped up on her screen. A maintenance diver had been sent out to fix a broken floodlight. His name was Mark. He was experienced, careful, and strong. He left the dome 2 hours ago. He was supposed to be back in 1. She clicked open a live feed from his suit. Static. No video. His vitals were flat, but his location signal still moved, slowly drifting away from the dome. Sarah called Commander Reyes on the intercom. "We have a problem," she said. Reyes came quickly. He was tall, serious, and didn't like to waste time. He looked at the screen. "Where is he asked. "His signal is here," Sarah said, pointing to a red on the map. "But his camera is dead, and we lost contact over an hour ago." Reyes cursed under his breath. "Send a drone," he said. Sarah nodded and pressed a button. Outside the dome, a small drone activated and began to move through the water toward Mark's last known position. The video feed showed darkness. Only the drone's light cut through the water, revealing dust, broken rocks, and the metal structures holding the dome together. Then the drone stopped. "What's that?" Sarah whispered. The video showed a piece of metal floating in the water. The drone moved closer. It was Mark's helmet. Crushed, twisted, almost flat. No blood. No sign of his body. "Pressure didn't do that," Reyes said. "That's not natural." Suddenly, the drone feed turned to static. The screen went black. Reyes looked at Sarah. "Bring it back." "I can't," she said. "The drone's gone." They both stared at the screen. Something had taken the diver. Something had destroyed the drone. And whatever it was, it didn't want to be seen. Later that night, Sarah sat alone in her lab, replaying old footage from camera 12. She slowed it down frame by frame. For a moment, she saw it. A blurry shape, long and fast, moving just past the edge of the dome. It was big, maybe 10 or 15 feet long. But the image was too dark, too fast, to see clearly. She called Reyes again. "There's something out there," she said. "It's not a glitch. I saw it." Reyes didn't look surprised. "You're not the first," he said. "Some of my men reported seeing shapes in the water last week. I told them it was nerves. Now I'm not so sure. What do we do?" Sarah asked. Reyes crossed his arms. "We watch. We don't panic. We keep this quiet until we know more." Sarah didn't sleep that night. She stayed in the control room, watching the screens. Camera 12 kept flickering. Then, just after 3 a.m., something changed. One by one, the outer lights along the dome began to shut off. Click, 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 like something was moving along the edge, breaking them one at a time. She reached for the intercom. "Commander Reyes, are you seeing this?" Before he could answer, the power in the room flickered. The lights dimmed. The air got colder. Sarah stood up. She looked at the large observation window. Outside was only darkness. Then a huge shape passed in front of the dome. A shadow. It moved smoothly, slowly. But it was big, very big. All the lights in the dome flickered again. For a second, everything went black. When the lights came back on, the shadow was gone. Sarah couldn't move. Her heart was pounding. She didn't know what she saw, but she knew one thing for sure. They were not alone. Inside Abyss 9, the tension was growing. The underwater city, once peaceful and quiet, now felt heavy and strange. People moved slower. They spoke in whispers. The lights seemed dimmer, like the darkness outside was slowly seeping in. Dr. Sarah Lane sat at her station, eyes locked on the screen. The feed from Diver Mark's suit had been dead the night before. But now something had changed. His signal had returned. It was weak and broken, but still moving. The GPS showed it drifting slowly near the west side of the dome, close to the same spot where the drone was lost. Sarah leaned closer to the speaker. There was no video, only static and a strange sound. A clicking noise. It wasn't random. It was slow, steady, and repeated again and again, like someone tapping on glass from far away. Commander Reyes stood beside her, arms crossed, his face hard. "He's been gone too long," he said. "No diver could survive that long outside, without a working suit. But the signal is moving," Sarah said. "And the clicking is not just noise." Reyes nodded. "We're sending a team. Within 30 minutes, for divers prepared to leave. Each one wore an upgraded suit, with stronger lights and better communication. Reyes chose his best people. He didn't say it, but everyone knew they might not come back. The team exited to the pressurized airlock, stepping into the black water outside the dome. Lights on their helmets cut through the darkness, showing only metal, sand, and the long support beams that held the city in place. Sarah and Reyes watched in the control room as the divers moved toward Mark's signal. "It's getting stronger," said one of the divers through the radio. "Signal's close now." The clicking sound got louder through the feed, slow and sharp, like metal tapping against metal. Then it changed. A new sound mixed in, something like breathing. "I don't like this," another diver whispered. "This doesn't feel right." "Keep going," Reyes said. "You're almost there." A few minutes later, they found it. The crushed helmet floated near a beam. It was clearly Mark's. The team confirmed the serial number, but there was still no sign of his body, just a helmet, twisted like it had been crushed by something massive. "Pressure can't do this," one of them said. "This is something else." Suddenly, the clicking noise changed again. It began to copy the team's voices. The exact same words they had just spoken started playing back to the radio, but in a cold, robotic tone. "This is something else," the voice repeated. The divers froze. "What the hell is that?" one of them asked. "I didn't say that," another replied. "That wasn't me." "It's repeating us," Sarah whispered from the control room. Then came silence. For a full minute, there was no sound, just the soft hum of the equipment and the divers breathing. Then, without warning, the video feed shook. One diver screamed. The camera spun. A blur of something large moved past the lens. The feed went black for one of the divers. "Team, status report." Reyes shouted. "We're under attack," one shouted. "Something's down here. It's fast." The remaining feed showed chaos, bubbles, flashing lights, and shadows moving in the distance. One diver shouted that he saw a tail. Another said something grabbed his leg, but let go. "Get out of there now." Reyes ordered, "Return to the dome immediately." The team didn't argue. They turned and swam hard, their lights bouncing off metal and rock as they rushed back. One of them kept looking back. "I see it," he yelled. "It's following us." Sarah looked at the sonar. A second signal had appeared behind the divers. It moved quickly, staying just out of sight. Whatever it was big. "Open the airlock," Reyes said. "Get them inside." In the water, the divers reached the docking bay. The doors opened just in time. They stumbled into the chamber, shouting, panting, shaking. One of them dropped to the floor, his hands covering his face. "It's real," he said. "It's real, and it's watching us." Reyes and Sarah ran to the airlock. One of the divers, a young man named Lero, couldn't stop shaking. Another, named Byrne, had a long scratch across his helmet. "It wasn't just one thing," Byrne said. "There are sounds, not just clicking." Voices. We heard voices, ours, coming from the dark. Sarah looked at his suit. The scratch was deep, far too deep for coral or rock. They brought the crushed helmet back with them. Sarah placed it on a table in her lab and studied it. The damage didn't look like it came from pressure or an accident. It looked like something had gripped it, tight and squeezed. Reyes didn't wait. He called an emergency meeting. "We are facing an unknown threat," he said. "From this point on, no one leaves the dome unless absolutely necessary. No solo missions. All exits must be cleared with me or Dr. Lane." People in the room whispered. Fear spread fast. Someone asked, "What about help from the surface?" Reyes shook his head. "It would take days. We're on our own." Back in the control room, the clicking sound started again. Sarah turned up the volume. The sound was changing again. This time it spoke a word. "Mark." Then silence. Sarah stared at the speaker. Her hands shook. That night, no one slept. Lights flickered in the halls. People said they heard tapping on the walls. And one technician swore he saw something moving outside the dome, something large, circling slowly. At 2:13 a.m., the alarms went off again. A motion sensor outside the north wall had picked up movement. Fast. Heavy. Reyes looked at the screen, and then at Sarah. "It's still out there," he said. Sarah nodded. "And it's getting closer." The deep silence of Abyss 9 was broken by the sharp scream of alarms. Red lights began flashing along the halls, and the cold, robotic voice of the city's warning system echoed through every room. Breach warning. Sector 4. Pressure drop detected. Dr. Sarah Lane jumped from her chair in the control room. Her heart raced as she stared at the alert blinking on the monitor. Sector 4 was located near the edge of the dome. It held a few labs and one of the secondary airlocks, but more importantly, it sat right where the last diver was attacked. Commander Reyes stormed in seconds later. "Status," he barked. "Pressure drop in Sector 4, Sarah replied. "It's not inside yet, but it's trying to break through." Reyes leaned over the console. The screen showed a live feed from the Sector 4 outer wall. For a few moments, everything looked normal, just the deep black of the ocean. Then the light from the outside flood lamps hit something strange. Claw marks, deep, long, and fresh, etched across the thick metal of the outer wall. "What the hell did that?" Reyes said. "We built those walls to hold back the ocean," Sarah whispered. "Not this." Another alarm started. The pressure in Sector 4 had dropped further. Not enough to crack the dome, but enough to show stress in the structure. The metal groaned. Everyone in the control room heard it, a long, low sound, like the city itself was in pain. Reyes grabbed the radio. "Evacuate Sector 4. Now. Get everyone out." Within minutes, the workers and scientists in that section were moving, rushing to the connecting halls to safer areas. A group of engineers closed the blast doors behind them, sealing Sector 4 off from the rest of the city. In the command center, the tension was thick. "We need to prepare the emergency pods," Sarah said. "If it breaks through..." "We're not abandoning the city," Reyes cut in. "Not yet. You saw the marks. You saw what happened to Mark. It's not safe anymore." Reyes shook his head. "If we run now, we leave this place behind forever. The research, the lives here, it all goes. We hold, at least until we know what we're dealing with." Sarah didn't argue, but her eyes said everything. She didn't want to die down here. The lights flickered again. It wasn't the first time it had happened, but this time was different. One by one, the outer floodlights began shutting down, starting from the north wall and moving like a wave towards Sector 4. Cameras outside went black as the lights near them turned off. Sarah typed quickly, trying to reboot the feeds. "It's not a system failure," she said. "Something's disabling them one by one." Reyes leaned closer to the screen. "It's hunting in the dark." Then the backup power cut out. For a few seconds, the entire dome went black. No sound, no light, just the hum of the deep sea pressing all around them. People screamed in the halls. Children cried. Infirmary monitors beeped wildly. Emergency lights flicked on a moment later. Dim red lighting painted the corridors like blood. The city now looked like a ghost ship, Sarah and Reyes both turned to the only monitor still showing a live feed. One camera had stayed on, camera 12, the one that first caught the blurry shape days ago. Something moved in front of it. The shape was large, smooth, and fast. But this time, it didn't vanish quickly. It turned, slowly, deliberately, and stared directly into the camera. Sarah gasped. The creature had no eyes, but it knew the lens was watching. Its skin was dark, rubbery, maybe wet. It had long arms, too long, and sharp claws at the ends. Rows of small, tooth-like structures covered its face, and it tilted its head in a strange, unnatural way. It knew. Reyes stared, his jaw tight. That's not a fish. That's not anything from Earth. Then the feed went black. A loud crash rang through the city. A deep boom, followed by the shaking of metal and stone. The floor under their feet trembled. The wall in Sector 4 had taken another hit. Another impact, Sarah said, checking the systems. The wall is holding, but it won't for long. Reyes made the call. Seal off the lower labs. Double the guard on all exits. No one leaves. No one moves without command. People work quickly, but fear had already spread. Whispers moved through the city like wildfire. They saw it. It looked at the camera. It's coming. Sarah stood alone in the corridor later, staring through a thick observation window at the dark water outside. The outer lights were still off. Nothing could be seen, but she felt it. It was out there, watching, waiting. Then she heard it, a soft clicking noise, like metal tapping on glass. It came from the wall itself. She stepped closer, pressing her ear to the window. Tap, tap, tap. From outside, she ran back to the control room. There's more than one, she said. It's not alone. Reyes looked at her. How do you know? It's already in position again. It's attacking a different part now, trying to find a weak point. Reyes clenched his fists. It's learning. As they checked the map of the city, new pressure warnings began flashing, not just in Sector 4, now in Sector 6 and the southern dome edge. It was moving fast. Testing. Hunting. We need to do something, Sarah said. We can't wait anymore. Reyes nodded. We'll prepare the escape pods, but only as a last option. As they worked, an alert flashed again. Camera 9 had come back online for a moment. Sarah clicked on it. The screen showed a hallway inside the dome, one of the storage areas. A light flickered in the background, and standing in the middle was the creature. Inside, looking directly into the camera. The alert was quiet at first. Just a soft tone, barely enough to draw attention. But Dr. Lane knew that sound. It wasn't a drill. It wasn't a test. Something was wrong. She looked up from her workstation and saw the pressure readings on the screen. The numbers were dropping fast. Sector 6 access tunnel. Reyes, she called into the intercom. We got another pressure drop. Same spot. Commander Reyes was already on his way, his boots echoing in the corridor. When he entered the control room, Lane pointed at the monitor. Tunnel 3C. Pressure loss starting exactly like before. Without hesitation, Reyes spoke into his headset. Seal off Tunnel 3C. Send a team to check for damage. The order was too late. A sound tore through the station. A deep metallic groan followed by a violent cracking noise. The wall gave way, and a surge of water blasted into the tunnel. Lights shattered. Alarms wailed. The camera feed showed chaos before it went dark. The city's emergency systems kicked in. Bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off the flooded section. But 2 workers didn't make it out. Their names appeared on the missing list within minutes. Lane stared at the blacked-out screen. She quickly rewound the footage, frame by frame. There, she whispered. A shape, quick, long, dark, flashed across the screen just before the breach. It rammed the wall once. Then again. The third hit caused a collapse. It knew what it was doing, she said aloud. It was testing us. Reyes clenched his jaw. Or learning. All over Abyss 9, the mood changed. Fear spread like smoke. People whispered in corridors. Some packed emergency bags. A few talked about escape pods. In the control room, Lane isolated the sound from the breach. A clicking noise, faint but steady. She played it over and over. "It's not random," she said. "It's a pattern. It's talking. To someone." Reyes turned to her, his expression hard. "You're saying there's more than one?" She nodded. "I think there are several. Maybe more. We don't know how many." The commander gave new orders. Reinforce all vulnerable areas. Increase patrols. Deploy drones. But the damage was done. The creature had tested their wall and won. A recovery team went into the flooded section to look for bodies. They found one helmet, crushed flat like paper. No body, just more of that strange clicking on the radio. "We're being hunted," one of the divers said. Later that night, in one of the half-flooded corridors near Sector 6, something moved. The water rippled. Slowly, silently, a shape rose out of it. A thin arm reached up. Then a second, the creature pulled itself onto the metal floor. Its skin was slick, dark, and wet. It had no eyes. Its face was smooth, with only a thin vertical slit of jagged teeth. It moved with terrifying ease, crawling on all fours. Then, behind it, another form rose from the water. Then another. There were at least 4. In the command center, Lane tried to keep calm. She reviewed heat scans and sonar images. Her hands were shaking. The creatures were avoiding direct light. They moved only in shadows and blind spots. "They're studying us," she said, "watching our routines, our systems. This isn't random." Suddenly, another alert. "Backup generator 2 offline." A technician called out. Camera footage showed the generator room in darkness. One light flickered. Then the image of twisted metal appeared. The generator had been torn open, not with tools, but with strength. Reyes stared at the monitor. "They're cutting our power." The control room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The city ran on air pumps, pressure regulators, lights, communications. Without power, Abyss 9 would die. "They want us blind," Reyes said, "and scared." In Sector 4, security teams moved cautiously. The air was heavy with tension. Red lights blinked softly. The floor was still wet from the earlier breach. Sergeant Malik led the team. He moved slowly, eyes scanning every shadow. Then behind him, a clicking sound echoed. He spun around. "Who's there?" Silence. He took one step forward, and the creature dropped from the ceiling. Fast. He didn't even get to scream. Just a flash of claws. Blood splattered against the wall. His partner shouted and fired, but the creature vanished into the darkness. "Command! We've got contact. They're inside." Reyes heard the call and activated full lockdown. Emergency barriers slammed down, but it was already too late. On one of the screens, figures moved fast through the main corridor. They crawled on the ceiling, walls, floors, unlike anything human. "They're hunting in packs," Lane whispered. In another hallway, an engineer tried to reach a secured room. She moved fast, her flashlight shaking in her hand. The clicking sound followed her. Then, from a vent, a hand shot out and grabbed her. The light dropped to the floor, spinning. Her screams were cut short. In the lab, Lane played the sound again. The clicking now had rhythm, like speech, not just noise. "They're talking to each other," she said. "Planning." She looked at the logs. Each attack was faster, more precise. First the wall, then the generator. Now the people. They're learning from us, getting smarter. Every hour, they understand us more. Reyes stood still, eyes on the map. If they know our layout, they'll hit the core next, the pressure controls, oxygen systems. If we lose those, we die. Lane finished. In the flooded corridor near the original breach, motion sensors blinked red. The camera came on. Something crawled out of the water. Again, but this time it didn't move alone. It was dragging something behind it, a human shape. It looked like the missing engineer. Her eyes were open, but her body moved strangely, like a puppet. Then behind her, 3 more creatures emerged, watching, waiting, and then one of them looked up, right into the camera. and smiled. The lights flickered above Dr. Lane's head, casting eerie shadows across the cold metal walls of the control room. For a moment, she thought the flickering was just a glitch in the power system. But deep down, she knew better. The creatures were inside. They were already here, and they were moving closer. Commander Reyes was at the front of the room, staring at the darkened monitors. They all knew what that meant. The creatures were getting bolder. No longer confined to the outside, they had breached the outer walls and made their way into the heart of the city. "We thought we were safe inside," Reyes muttered, his voice low. "We were wrong." Dr. Lane couldn't disagree. The city had been built to withstand everything the ocean could throw at it, but nothing had prepared them for this. Whatever these creatures were, they didn't belong here. The way they moved, the way they hunted, they weren't like anything they had seen before. She turned away from the monitors and glanced at the others in the room. Sergeant Dawson was sharpening his weapon, his eyes focused, never leaving the metal blade. Lieutenant Singh was checking the traps they had set up throughout the city, trying to predict the creatures' movements. But it was clear no one knew what they were up against. "The traps are ready," Singh said, her voice steady, but her hands were trembling slightly as she adjusted the triggers. "But I'm not sure if they'll work. These things, they're smarter than we thought." Dr. Lane nodded, her thoughts drifting back to the symbols she had found earlier. They were carved deep into the city's foundation, ancient and alien. There was no doubt in her mind anymore. These creatures weren't from Earth. They were something else. Something older. Something not human. "What do you think they want?" Reyes asked, glancing over at Dr. Lane. She shook her head, her mind racing. She had no answers. The only thing she knew for sure was that the creatures were not attacking blindly. They were searching for something. But what? "They're not just here to kill," Dr. Lane said quietly. "They're looking for something, and I think they know exactly where to find it." The room fell silent as everyone exchanged uneasy glances. They had all felt it. The strange energy in the air, the growing sense that something was wrong. It wasn't just the creatures outside. It was the city itself. Something was hidden beneath its walls, something ancient that no one understood. Suddenly, the ground shook. A low, rumbling sound filled the air and the lights flickered again. Dr. Lane grabbed the edge of the control desk, steadying herself. The shaking stopped as quickly as it had started, but it was enough to make everyone jump. "They're inside the ventilation system," Singh said, her voice tight. "They've been moving through the air ducts." "How do they know where to go?" Dawson asked, his eyes wide. "How are they getting through everything so quickly?" Dr. Lane couldn't answer him. The question had been on her mind for days. But every time she tried to make sense of it, the pieces didn't fit. The creatures were too fast, too efficient. They were acting with a purpose. They weren't just wandering through the city. They were hunting, and they were getting closer. "They must have some kind of intelligence," Reyes said, his voice low. "But what do they want? Why are they here?" Dr. Lane turned toward the nearest monitor, her heart racing. She checked the security feeds again, looking for anything that could explain the situation. But all she saw was darkness. Static. The cameras had been disabled. The footage looping over and over with nothing but a blurred black screen. Then she saw it, a movement in the corner of one screen. It was quick, too quick for the human eye to follow. The creature was just a shadow, but it was there, lurking in the background. Dr. Lane's breath caught in her throat. She quickly zoomed in on the image. The creature was moving fast, but it wasn't alone. There were more of them, moving silently, like shadows, through the corridors of the city. "Stay sharp," Reyes ordered, his voice commanding. "We can't let them get any closer." But even as he spoke, Dr. Lane felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that no matter how many traps they set, no matter how many doors they locked, it wouldn't be enough. The creatures were already inside. They had breached the city's heart, and they weren't going to stop until they had what they came for. A loud crash echoed through the hallways, followed by the sound of metal grinding against metal. The team rushed toward the sound, weapons in hand, but Dr. Lane hesitated. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach. These creatures weren't just attacking. They were testing them, learning, Adapting, the team entered the darkened hallway, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. The air was thick with tension, and every creak of the building felt amplified in the silence. They were being hunted, and they didn't even know the rules of the game. "We need to find a way to communicate with them," Dr. Lane said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to know what they want." But even as she spoke, something moved in the darkness ahead. A faint whisper of sound, a soft scrape of something sharp against the metal. The team froze, eyes scanning the shadows. Then, without warning, a creature darted out of the darkness. It was smaller than the ones they had seen before, but its eyes glowed with an eerie red light. It hissed, showing rows of sharp teeth, and lunged toward them. Dawson fired first, the loud crack of the gun echoing through the hall. The creature shrieked, but it didn't stop. Instead, it turned and ran, disappearing back into shadows. "They're getting faster," Singh said, her voice tight. "And they're not alone." Dr. Lane's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the city pressing down on her. The walls closing in. They were running out of time. The creatures were learning, adapting to their every move. And they were getting stronger. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life. A single word echoed through the static. "Return." Dr. Lane froze. It wasn't a voice she recognized. It was low, distorted, almost like a whisper, but it was clear enough. "Return." The word hung in the air, leaving a cold, sinking feeling in Dr. Lane's chest. She turned to the others, her face pale. "What does it mean?" Reyes asked, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Dr. Lane replied, "but I think we're about to find out." Dr. Lane sat alone in the dimly lit room, the hum of the city systems the only sound around her. She had been going through the project's old records for hours, piecing together bits and pieces of information. There were too many inconsistencies in the reports, too many holes in the timeline. The truth was hidden, buried beneath layers of corporate secrecy. But now she had found something. She clicked through the final folder on her terminal, and what appeared on the screen made her breath catch. It was an old report, dated years before the city's construction even began. The words were grainy, the ink fading, but the message was clear. The founders of Abyss 9 had known about the ruins beneath the city. They had built the station on top of something ancient, something not human. A cold shiver ran down Dr. Lane's spine. She scrolled down, her heart pounding as the truth slowly revealed itself. The creatures they were fighting weren't just some unknown species. They were something far older, something that had been disturbed when the city's foundations were laid. The report detailed how construction workers had unearthed strange artifacts during the early stages of the city's development. Symbols, carvings, and other signs of an ancient civilization, alien in origin. But the most chilling part was a final entry, a warning. The ruins below are not dead. The beings within will not tolerate intruders. They will see us as invaders. Dr. Lane's fingers trembled as she closed the report. The pieces clicked together in her mind. The creatures were not just mindless beasts. They were protecting something. They had been disturbed by the construction of the city. And now, they saw the humans as invaders. "Damn it," she whispered to herself. She had known it. There was something wrong with this place. And now she had the confirmation. Abyss 9 had been built on top of an ancient alien ruin, a place that had never meant to be disturbed. She stood up, pacing around the room. Reyes had insisted they fight, but Lane wasn't so sure anymore. This wasn't a typical enemy. They were dealing with something far older, far more dangerous than anything they had anticipated. These creatures weren't just animals. They were guardians, protectors of something buried deep below the city. As she ran her fingers through her hair, her mind raced. She couldn't help but think back to the symbols she had seen in the city's foundation. They were similar to the ones in the report, but there was more. The symbols were a warning, yes, but they were also a message. What if the creatures were trying to communicate? She needed to know more. She needed to understand what was beneath them and why these creatures were so desperate to protect it. Dr. Lane took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She had to find a way to communicate with them, to make them understand that they weren't the real threat. The city was. They were the ones who had disturbed the ancient resting place of the creatures. She grabbed her jacket, heading for the door, but before she could reach it, a sharp knock echoed through the room. It was Reyes. "Dr. Lane, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight, his expression grim. "What is it, Commander?" Dr. Lane asked, trying to hide her frustration. "We've got a situation," Reyes replied, his eyes hard. "We can't sit around and wait for them to make the next move. We're fighting back." "Reyes, this isn't just some simple attack," Dr. Lane said, trying to keep her voice calm. "These creatures are here for a reason. We need to understand that reason if we want to survive. Fighting them won't solve anything." Reyes shook his head. "We can't reason with them, Lane. These things are killing people. They're not here to talk. They're here to wipe us out. We need to be prepared." Dr. Lane stared at him, feeling a pang of frustration. She had heard his argument before, but it wasn't what she believed. They couldn't just treat these creatures as enemies to be eliminated. There was something more going on, something they weren't seeing. But now, she wasn't sure how to make Reyes understand. She glanced at the terminal one last time, at the report she had just discovered. The city's future, and perhaps even their survival, depended on the choices they made now. If they could only find a way to communicate with the creatures, they might be able to find a peaceful solution. But Reyes wouldn't want to listen to that. Not now. Not while they were in the middle of a fight. Dr. Lane opened her mouth to speak. But before she could say anything, the entire city seemed to shake. The lights flickered, then went out completely. The emergency alarms blared, filling the air with an awful screeching noise. "Not again," Reyes muttered under his breath, rushing toward the control panel. Dr. Lane's heart raced. This wasn't just another attack. Something was happening deep beneath the city. Something was moving. She grabbed her communicator, her hand trembling. She could hear the chaos in the background, people shouting, alarms blaring, and then, through the noise, she heard a voice, a clear, distinct voice that made her stop in her tracks. The voice came to the radio, smooth and calm, speaking in perfect English. "Return." Dr. Lane's blood ran cold. It was the same word she had heard before, only this time it was clearer, stronger. She turned to Reyes, her face pale. "What does it mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Reyes stared at her, his face grim. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's coming from deep below us." Dr. Lane took a step back. The creatures weren't just defending something. They were waiting for something or someone to come back. The radio crackled again, and the voice spoke once more. "Return." The words hung in the air, cold and ominous. Dr. Lane couldn't shake the feeling that they were being drawn into something much larger than they had ever imagined, something far older than the city itself. And now, the creatures were calling them back. The final attack came without warning, a flood of creatures that swarmed the dome like a wave crashing against the shore. Reyes was ready. His team had been preparing for this moment, setting up deep-sea weapons, pressure traps, and every defensive measure they could think of. But the sheer number of creatures, their strength, and their relentless drive to destroy made every effort feel useless. They were everywhere, clawing at the walls, breaking through pipes, and attacking anything in sight. It was chaos. "Get to your stations," Reyes shouted, his voice cutting through the panic. His eyes were hard, his expression grim, but his movements were quick, precise. The creatures were already in the outer corridors, breaking through the airlocks. They were flooding in faster than expected. The dome, their only safe haven, was on the brink of collapse. Dr. Lane was in the central control room, staring at the monitors. The city's defenses were holding up, but barely. The creatures were smart, moving in ways that made it clear they were learning. They had been getting stronger, faster, more organized. Lane's fingers flew across the console as she sent out the final signal, the one she hoped would end the madness. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. She didn't know if it would work, but if there was even the smallest chance it would stop the creatures. She had to try. Her pulse raced as the signal was transmitted. The screen flickered, showing only static for a moment before the words appeared. "Return." It was the same word they had heard before. The creatures had spoken it when they first encountered them. But this time, it felt different. It was almost like the creatures were waiting for something for this very moment. Dr. Lane's breath caught in her throat. What if the signal worked? What if they could communicate, negotiate, and bring an end to the bloodshed? But there was no time to think about that. The creatures were still attacking, and the city was barely holding together. She turned her attention to the monitors again. A new wave of creatures was breaking through the northern sector. Reyes's team was scrambling to respond, try and set traps, using every weapon they had. But the creatures weren't afraid. They moved with purpose, like they had one goal: destroy everything in their path. Outside, the ocean's pressure was rising, and the walls of the dome groaned under the strain. The water pressure was immense, pushing against the weakened barriers. It wouldn't take much longer before the dome cracked, before the ocean swallowed them whole. Reyes was on the front lines, coordinating the defense. He ordered his team to fire the deep-sea weapons, sending blasts of electricity into the water to stun the creatures and slow their progress. But even as they managed to kill a few, more replaced them. The creatures were endless, relentless. Move, move, Reyes shouted, leading his team through the corridors. The creatures were everywhere now, their claws tearing into the walls, their screeches filling the air. The dome's lights flickered, and the sound of water sloshing against the barriers grew louder, more terrifying. The pressure was building, and the dome was starting to buckle. Back in the control room, Dr. Lane was still trying to make sense of the signal. Her mind raced. If the creatures didn't stop, if they didn't respond to a message, the city would fall. There would be no escape. They would all die down here, lost to the deep ocean. She checked the sonar once more. There was no sign of the creatures retreating. The signal hadn't worked. Not yet. She had to keep trying. And then, just as everything seemed lost, something changed. A low rumble echoed through the control room. Dr. Lane froze, her fingers hovering over the console. She turned to the sonar, her heart pounding. The screen flickered, and a new shape appeared on the radar. It wasn't like the creatures they had been fighting. This was bigger, much bigger. Dr. Lane's eyes widened as the shape grew closer on the screen. It was moving deep beneath the city, rising slowly but steadily. The shape was massive, far larger than anything they had encountered, and it was heading straight for the dome. The creature on the sonar was unlike anything Dr. Lane had ever seen. Its form was twisted, massive, and vaguely humanoid, but with features that were far too alien to comprehend. It had appendages, sharp and long, but it moved with an eerie grace that sent chills down her spine. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't one of the creatures they had been fighting. This was something else, something far more powerful. "Reyes," she shouted, her voice shaking with fear. "You need to get back here. Now!" Reyes's voice crackled over the intercom. "What is it, Lane? What's going on?" "There's something bigger than the creatures. It's coming from deep below us," she said, her voice tight with panic. "I think we've woken it up. The true master of the deep is coming." Reyes's response was cut off by a loud crash. The sound of metal breaking filled the air, followed by screams from his team. Dr. Lane's heart skipped a beat. The creatures were tearing through the last of the city's defenses. She stared at the sonar screen, unable to tear her eyes away from the shape that was growing ever closer. It was massive, impossible to ignore. The creatures they had been fighting were nothing compared to this thing. The ground trembled and the lights flickered again. The city's alarms went off, warning them of the breach in the northern sector. The ocean pressure was rising, and the dome was reaching its breaking point. "We can't hold them off much longer." Reyes's voice crackled through the intercom again. It was filled with the sound of gunfire, of people shouting. "We're going to need backup, Lane. We need more firepower." But Lane knew that it was already too late for that. The city had been doomed from the start. The creatures had been only a small part of the problem. The real danger had been lying deep below the surface, waiting for the right moment to rise. And now that moment had come. Dr. Lane watched as the shape on the sonar screen grew ever closer. The ground shook again, harder this time. The walls of the dome groaned under the pressure, the ocean pushing from all sides. The true master of the deep had awakened, and there was no stopping it now. She grabbed her communicator, tried to reach Reyes, but the signal was down. The intercoms were silent. The city was falling apart, and all she could do was watch as the shape grew closer, ready to rise from the deep and claim what had once been theirs.